Mr Deputy President, as the Minister responsible for this has admitted, these bills are not required. Even today, the Greens have conceded that these bills are largely symbolic. So let's not gild the lily. This bill does nothing to fix the climate emergency. Let's not have a lend of ourselves. This bill does not lower 1 milligram of emissions. Let's not paint stripes on a horse and tell me it's a zebra. This bill does not save the planet. One thing this bill is not is a plan. But this form of symbolism has consequences, and the burden of these consequences will be borne by regional Australia. I'll sideline a little bit. I was hurt by the words that if you oppose this bill, you are some sort of psychopath or a shill for the mining industry. I think we're better than that. I think that lowers the tone of people's experiences in life, and I don't think it ends in a solution that we want to do in this party. Unlike most members opposite, I have lived with coal for most of my life. Growing up, I could see the drag lines from my parents' kitchen window every morning. My community in the Hunter, which Labor Party claims to represent, runs on coal. From the mine to the mechanic to the general store. Without support, as we have seen in Europe, it is these communities that will lose their jobs, lose security and ultimately lose hope. How do I face people I went to school with who work in the industry and tell them I didn't do enough to protect their job, their home and their family? None of them want to hurt the planet. They don't want to jump in the Ranger and go off to work with dreams of melting glaciers. They just want to put a meal on the table and a roof over their head. How do I tell Scott that if he manages to get a job paying $70,000 less, I didn't stand up for him? We must not fall into the same trap as Europe. We must learn from their mistakes of the past, and we must ensure that we support those who will be impacted the hardest. The Nationals believe in practical action to address the impacts of climate change and a no person and no place left behind approach to the transition. It appears that all parties of government believe we need to reach net zero, and I think we do believe it can be achieved, but also believe targets based solely on ideology without any real plan will not achieve a fair outcome for communities. I'm one of the few in this place that went to COP last year. I toured regions in the north of England and parts of Scotland that have been crippled by a sudden and severe reduction and elimination of mining, steel and manufacturing. The advice most common when I was asking the question of a way to look for transition was, we can show you how not to do it. The Nationals believe that if we to decarbonise the economy, it has to be fair and just. I sat on the inquiry for this bill. I also listened to the evidence presented to us of the intended and unintended consequences that these bills will yield. The committee was presented with evidence that a typical worker in regional Australia is over 3 times more likely to have their jobs put at risk by the policy of net zero emissions by 2050 than a typical worker in the inner city. This is because workers in regional areas are far more likely to work in industries such as coal mining, heavy industry and agriculture. We received submissions, as my leader before me said, that showed that to achieve the government's target, all 89 coal, gas and oil projects in the construction pipeline must be cancelled. This will come at the cost of approximately 480,000 jobs, which would have otherwise been created. The UN has stated a global transition towards a low-carbon and sustainable economy has both positive and negative impacts on employment. Policymakers must smooth the edges of this transformation by developing just transition policies for affected workers and their communities. In 2021, the European Union announced the European Green Deal, with more than €500 billion package, providing tangible investments to deliver sustainable social outcomes as member states transition through their economies. Neither these bills or the government to date have acknowledged the same principles outlined by the EU or the UN. The committee was not furnished with any evidence, either by submission or testimony, that the government has any intention of a similar package being developed or being considered. Just like the science, where those opposite quote the infallibility of the IEA when they say that wind will grow 25% higher on average over the next 5 years, and 24% for solar, but they can't accept the same body and the same science saying without an important contribution from nuclear power, the global energy transition will be that much harder. Those opposite also want all the corporate climate change strategies of Europe, but want to supply none of the safety measures for regional communities that were put in place. Regional Australia, under the Greens' Labor policy, is to get all of the pain and none of the gain. The Australian government cannot guarantee, through faith alone, that the promise of carbon-neutral jobs from new industries, energy projects and technology will be in the same communities as those predicted job losses. The Nationals consider that legislating a 43% reduction in CO2 emissions by 2030 without a complementary package of financial support for affected communities and carbon-intensive industries, particularly in rural and regional Australia, presents a clear and present danger to the welfare of our communities. The Nationals believe a guaranteed investment package based on the United Nations principles develop leveraging opportunities generated from the global focus on technological advancements to decarbonise economies is required. If managed properly and administered sensibly, such investments have the potential to grow the Australian economy and create new work opportunities in the regions, whilst transitioning those impacted workforces and local economies. The Nationals believe there is widespread community and industry support to establish regional transition authority, or several, to address specific regional communities and outcomes. We need to get the boots on the ground. The inquiry heard it has specific support from the likes of the Business Council of Australia, the Grattan Institute and the Blueprint Institute to do this. Over the last 2 decades, we have been told we must listen to experts in transitions to net zero. Listening to the experts over the 2 days of hearings, we heard, and I quote, "To achieve net zero transition, we are going to need to build a lot of big things and many distributed small things around the country, major new mines for lithium, for rare earths and for a range of other inputs," by Mr Tennant-Reed. Can we afford to delay the mining approvals for these things if we are to transition, but no plan is in place? Again, I quote, "By 2030 globally, we need to increase lithium production fourfold, double rare earth element output, and deliver a 67% increase in nickel and produce 32% more copper." That was from Ms Constable. Our new net zero economy relies upon increased rooftop, farm solar projects and electric vehicles. All of these elements require rare earth minerals sooner rather than later. However, the problem is, and I quote again, "In terms of what is being suggested, we will need more copper investment to occur, more nickel and cobalt to occur, and that is not happening. I don't think we're on the right trajectory with things like copper. We're just not exploring enough and not finding enough of the new mines of the future," said Mr Zavatiero. If we aren't doing enough to build the things to get there, we are in trouble. Without these resources, building the connectivity required for 82% target of renewables under Labor is not going to happen. So, if we are to transition to net zero, we need to increase mining of rare minerals. This will also assist in growing our economy and offsetting potential job losses. Where is the plan for this? Where is the support for this? There is none. So tomorrow morning, this bill will proceed. A goal without a plan, giving the regions fear but not hope. We will be told we have to honour the percentage of science that affirms the views of those opposite, whilst ignoring the science that they don't agree with. And essentially, that is what this bill is. What I stated at the beginning, from the mouths of some opposite, a bill that is largely symbolic, or as the minister responsible said, a bill that is not required. Why are we doing this?